world. And of course, today we're here to talk about AI and the future of work. Kicking off the session is Nick Wittenberg, who joins us. He is a Washington, D.C. ALC rep. What that means is the ALC stands for the Alumni Leadership Council at the Washington Center. This was just launched in the spring of 2023, and there are 14 regional representatives around the country who all represent TWC in their community and are wonderful support to our team as we work to expand our operations and do more things like this. Nick Wittenberg is an attorney and specialist leader with Deloitte in the government and public services practice. He works on the implementation of AI into the Federal Family for Freedom of Information Act and privacy requests, litigation matters, regulatory investigations. It's a mouthful, Nick, your list of things you do. And Nick works with state and local partners in implementing legal technology strategies. Previously, he worked in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy as Senior Legal Counsel. So thank you so much, Nick, for being here and representing the ALC.
Awesome. Yeah, no, super excited. Thank you so much, Sam, for the introduction. And so as Sam mentioned, the Alumni Leadership Council is a really cool opportunity for our alumni to get engaged. It launched in 2023. And so we have 14 members from U.S. and Puerto Rico across the U.S., and we're really looking forward to engagement and dialogue. And so this is really exciting. Today is this conversation really near and dear to my heart, artificial intelligence. And so we've got folks on our call this afternoon from all over the globe. So I'm excited for the discussion and chat. And please feel free to drop a question in the chat. We hope to answer it. If not, we can be sure to follow up. So I want to introduce our panelists today for us, two all-stars in this exciting area that is near and dear to everybody. Where a few years ago, generative AI was a completely new term, artificial intelligence over 50 years old, but we were also really rock stars. We're going to have a good dialogue today. Vicki Allums, she another TWC alum from 1978. And she's also on the Washington Center Board of Trustees, which is really exciting and brings that kind of full circle experience for the Washington Center. She has a really large and extensive policy and legal experience for government, nonprofit, and practicing in the areas of domestic and international intellectual property law, licensing, IP enforcement, international trade, cyber law, cybersecurity, and information security matters. She is the Learning Director of Intellectual Property at the Defense Acquisition University, part of the Department of Defense. So super excited to have her kick off this conversation. And then we also have Geoff Schaefer, who is also a alumni from the Washington Center from 2007. Cool background and cool title he has. He is head of responsible artificial intelligence at Booz Allen. So what he does with his team is they make AI ethics and safety more practical, tangible, and useful. Before Booz Allen, he worked for a variety of organizations across the intelligence community and financial sector. So I'm going to kick it over to Vicki to get us on here. And as a reminder, feel free to put a question in there so we have a nice interactive dialogue this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I want to thank Kim and Delita and Sam and everyone at TWC for sponsoring this. This is such an exciting topic and one that I'm very interested in because of my background, both as a technology lawyer, but also as an intellectual property lawyer, and somebody who has a background in cybersecurity, which crisscrosses some of the privacy issues that are raised by AI. So this is an exciting topic. You know, I was at a class this summer in the United Kingdom where the professor said something that startled the entire audience. He said that countries would have to provide a living wage for their citizens in the future because the job market was going to be so impacted by AI. And you should have seen the looks of everybody sitting in the audience. Folks had this terrified look on their face. And so that's one of the first questions we will start with. So Geoff, how will AI impact the future job market? Will some jobs be eliminated, or will AI actually spur technological innovations and new jobs? So what do you think on this?
Small question, Vicki. And it's good to be here with everyone today. This is great. I love engaging with TWC so much. I miss it. So it's great to see folks. And as Kim said in the chat, it's great to see everyone from literally all over the place. So I think I saw Moldova, which is amazing. I'm actually going to be in Croatia next month, so a little bit closer to you. But I think, to your question, Vicki, I think one thing we're not really grappling with is how different this transition is from previous transitions. So, we always talk about how every technological change or disruption in the past has resulted in net new jobs. And we compare and contrast our current situation with the Industrial Revolution most frequently. But if we really look at the data, that transition took 75 years and left a lot of people behind. ChatGPT, not even a year old. And already we have companies like IBM talking about how their hiring strategies are changing, i.e., they are hiring fewer people, or they are foregoing hiring certain types of roles because AI is already impacting how they do work. That's in less than 1 year. So I think the speed and the scale and the scope of this disruption, AI on and throughout the workplace, I think we cannot underestimate. And then the second thing I'd say is we have basically no track record in successfully transitioning. So, Vicki, we talked previously about the book Janesville.
Right. Yes.
For me, hugely influential book that I read a few years back. For those that haven't heard of it, Janesville is actually Paul Ryan's home district. This amazing ethnography came out. It's probably 10 plus years old at this point, but basically it described the town being very progressive, small p progressive, when they basically were grappling with losing the single industry in their community, which was car manufacturing. So they had a lot of foresight. As the I think it was GM and Ford, but maybe just GM, they were signaling, hey, we're probably going to shut down our manufacturing base here for X, Y, and Z reasons. And so the town started rallying. And long story short, they put together a really comprehensive upskilling and reskilling plan across their community for all those that would be impacted and more. Spoiler alert, it failed pretty spectacularly, but not for want of trying. And it failed for a bunch of different reasons that we really have not solved or are no better at today. From the smallest things like a huge fraction of those workers impacted not knowing how to literally use a computer. And so they couldn't take their cybersecurity upskilling courses because they couldn't even log on. They'd never used an operating system before. And that's not said with judgment. That is just an example of how I think we make way too many assumptions about what reskilling, upskilling, and transitioning folks actually looks like in practice. And so when we have disruption happening much quicker than it ever has in the past, when we're looking at a disruption that impacts every single socio-demographic category, every single job family, every single sector, every single domain, and have no precedent for that. And then when we look at our track record at transitioning folks through previous disruptions, I am frankly worried. And I state that with conviction such that we can get this conversation on the table and influencing and informing more of the policy discussions that need to happen in a very realistic and pragmatic manner, such that we have a chance to make it through this disruption without leaving, one or two or more generations behind.
Right. And actually that question was submitted by Patricia. Thank you, Patricia. You know, Geoff, when I heard you, I just listened intently with what you're saying, because I think it really picks out some key themes in terms of what must happen at a local level, but also a state level in terms of strategic planning by both our government officials, but also working in tandem with companies and corporations and organizations. I think that's in terms of the whole retooling process, sort of identifying those kinds of issues and then strategically put a plan in place. And it's a long-term plan, to be honest with you, in terms of how you retool folks for what's happening in the future with AI. And so I think it's a great opportunity. And I think I'm worried as well, as was our professor back in the UK this summer, definitely worried. And it's not only our country, it's the entire world that is will have to deal with the impact on employment that AI is going to have. And so that strategic planning, but also I want to hone in on the word opportunity, because I think this provides an awful lot of opportunity, as many other transitions that we've gone through from the industrial age to the digital age. All of those have been transitions that have given us opportunity. So let's talk a little about the benefits of AI. And Chris submitted this question. What are the benefits of AI? Is it all bad? Is it all good?
Well, I love that question. Before we get to that, actually, Vicki, you made me think of one other thing. So I was kind of nerding out with a fellow practitioner in the responsible AI community the other day. And one of the things that we were talking about is, as we think about this transition in what the future of work is going to look like, so much of that is economics, and will require, thusly, new economic models, new ways of thinking about how to organize and structure society. And if you look at the field of, so I was an economics undergraduate major. I love economics, but if you look at the field right now, who's doing interesting work? Almost nobody. Ideology aside, I say this neutrally, the only person that really comes to mind is Thomas Piketty. And you can agree with his approach to economics or not, his economic thought or not, but he's at least making kind of an impact in the field and trying to stretch our thinking in new ways. But it's also in a very narrow way, and it's also very historically focused, obviously with lessons for now and in the future. But beyond that, when we're talking about a whole-scale disruption and transformation of our economic models, because all of our previous ways of understanding the labor force, how to measure that, labor economics, utility economics, et cetera, when that is on the verge of being thrown out the window, I don't see enough folks coming up behind from our economic programs with, frankly, bold ways of thinking and the courage and the conviction to throw new ideas on the table, because a lot of our models are about to be destined for the scrap heap. And so now is the time for innovation in economics. So for any of the alumni or students that we have on the call today, don't discount economics, or if you already majored in economics, don't discount the utility of your major and how much impact that can have in this conversation as we embark on this major transition.
And you're absolutely.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what you're raising is really a multidisciplinary approach to all of this, and I know we both have public policy backgrounds, and I think that's a big key to this. But it's not something that we do well. That's part of the whole strategic sort of thinking and planning and working sort of as a whole of society that I think we have to do. And given the speed of this particular technology, we really have to do that, and to do it pretty quickly. That's the scary part.
Yeah. So as a strategist myself, I love the focus on strategic planning.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think that is the call to arms. I think that is the mission. But why would we do this? That gets to the next question about, what impact is AI going to have? Is it all good? Is it all bad, et cetera?
Right.
So let me start like a good politician by answering a different question first.
Right.
and I'll back into that question. So one thing I talk about a lot and is really the focus of our work at Booz Allen is basically this new type of ethical calculus in AI. And so if you go back 2,000 plus years and look at what the classical philosophers were really concerned with, it wasn't principally questions of right versus wrong. And I think that's what we normally imagine when we talk about ethics or philosophy. Really, what they were concerned with was what it means to live a good life. Aristotle termed this eudaimonia, which is kind of this weird combination of happiness and flourishing. But those were kind of the principal questions of the day. What does it mean to live a good life? How would we measure that? What goes into that, et cetera? So in AI, right now, we are trying to open up the aperture and how we think about what a responsible AI algorithm looks like. And so right now, the field is focused, we think, too myopically on risks and harms versus the broader good that these AI systems can, what we might consider to be ethical or not. And so one example I give, and I'll start coming back to the first question here, which cracked the 50-year challenge in biology of protein folding, which has all sorts of downstream benefits in healthcare, from precision medicine to better diagnostics, et cetera. This example is actually old because 2 weeks ago they released a new system called Alpha MySense, I think it's pronounced, which is being used to track or diagnose really rare diseases. And so when I think about what AI stands to do, where I'm excited, it's in science. I think AI is going to transform our understanding across every single science discipline, from healthcare, as we were just discussing, to physics, which frankly I'm most excited about. Because if you think about it, we really don't understand much about physics. We think we do, but if 98% of the universe is made up of dark matter, which is our current hypothesis, and we don't know anything about dark matter, then we have a 98% shortfall in our understanding of the universe. But already we're seeing AI help us understand physics in new and different ways. We're already using AI to control fusion reactors better and get closer to the promise of fusion-driven energy. And there are all sorts of equations in physics right now that are being tested anew and cracked open using AI techniques. Chemistry, we're able to synthesize chemical compounds with just a ChatGPT interface with code interpreter connected out to those chemical synthesis processes. That's going to transform how we do chemistry, how we understand chemistry. And so when I think about what AI is going to do for society, I look no further than the hard sciences and all the downstream impacts that's going to have on all sorts of sectors: human health, transportation, energy, et cetera.
You know, it reminds me a lot of the Human Genome Project back in the 90s, a similar kind of, but AI is I think even more pervasive than that. But the potential of that to really impact humanity is I think what we're kind of getting at, and that's a good benefit. Do you see any disadvantages, or and we've talked a little about the job market, but anything else that you see could, especially because we're talking about, you know, the planet, we're talking about this is going to impact everybody. In terms of disruptions, any disadvantages to AI?
So the two things I focus on, Vicki, the one, like you said, we already discussed, is the impact to the workforce and how we're handling that. The second thing, which I think is also underrated, is this phenomenon of emergent behavior. And so emergent behavior is basically when you have a complex system that's adaptive and learning, you have behavior that's produced by that system that you can't predict ahead of time. because it's evolving, it's learning, it's adapting, it's acquiring new capabilities, it's reading its environment in novel ways, and is going to react in similarly novel ways. And so when we think about generative AI systems, we have systems that are already hugely powerful, but are also showing quite a lot of emergent behavior. And so one example is GPT-4. That was not designed or programmed specifically to code, but it can. You can ask it to code you a video game or automate a process using Python or any other coding language of choice. And it will do it. Sometimes poorly, but sometimes to a really high degree of excellence. That's an emergent behavior. So that, for me, that's an example of something that's quite good and useful. But you could imagine all sorts of emergent behavior that we can't control, that are risky, that introduce quite a lot of entropy into our ecosystem. And the more processes and systems and procedures we hand over to AI, whether humans remain in the loop or not, the more we open up the risk profile of these systems and risk emergent behavior, taking us down roads that we couldn't predict ahead of time and we don't know how to control.
And, you know, that's a really good point. Anything that I say, of course, I have to put my disclaimer on. I'm saying in my personal capacity and not as a Department of Defense official, but there are a lot of bad actors out there who would use this technology, as with any new and emerging technology, for nefarious purposes, really. And you know, I could list several of them, but I won't go into. You just have to turn on the news every day to see the types of bad actors and how they would use this technology. So what do you think? How do we, as a global society, try to tackle that problem so that folks use it for all of the good advantages and benefits that you talked about earlier, versus these bad actors out there who might want to use it for their own purposes that would be against our interests and certainly the interest of countries around the world?
Yeah. Another small question.
Yes. Yes.
Let's take it at two levels: the global level and or the nation state level, and kind of the individual threat actor level. So at the nation state level, I think it's inevitable. It's already happening, as you said, Vicki, that our adversaries, the US and our allies, are going to use this technology to their advantage and our disadvantage wherever they can, to whatever degree they can, short of triggering some sort of confrontation that they would not feel is in their interest. I am not as worried about that, which I know sounds shocking, because we have a playbook, you know, for this. Every, let's just say, generation, every decade, at least temporarily, accrues strategic advantage to one side or the other. When there is offensive capabilities, we are quick to generate defensive capabilities using same or similar technologies. I think the same will be true of AI, is currently true of AI. And so I think we'll reach some sort of equilibrium pretty quickly. That's not to say there is not risk, and where there's strategic advantage arbitrage, we'll say, where country X has an advantage for just long enough to exploit it and achieve some sort of lasting gains or impact to our national security. That's a non-trivial risk, and we should treat it as such. I worry a bit more about the individual actors or the small groups. I don't want to say terrorists or lone wolves, just because I think it's the array of threat actors is much broader than that. And I worry that in the past we have had a very narrow view of who our enemies are or where risks come from. And I would be loath for us to shift into a new paradigm with those blinders on. But I think it could, you know, from individuals to the small groups, We have folks that would be motivated to use AI systems to do biohacking, to synthesize new biological agents, to release them in public places. That risk factor is not new, but AI makes that potentially easier and more deadly and more difficult to detect. So that's maybe not quite a net new risk, but a new type of that risk that we should contend with. It makes cyber attacks as well as cyber defenses more interesting and more effective, at least in part. And so you can imagine on and on down the line of threat vectors and threat actors, how AI is going to enhance their capabilities, but also enhance our defenses. So to kind of wrap that up and to be slightly cheesy, it's like we'll just have to remain ever vigilant, like we have done in the past. But now the speed and the scale, again, not only for disruption to the workforce, but in terms of capability acquisition and enhancement, that is a net new phenomenon. The speed and the scope there. And so if we pretend like this is a threat that is coming in the future versus one that's already here, we've already lost, because it's here, and these things are happening.
So a great response. Now, we've talked about some of the geopolitical concerns related to AI. Cal, you raised a really great question. What are some of the other concerns that you see related to AI?
So I frankly, I'm an AI optimist. So despite my job, which in some ways I'm bad at because I'm such an optimist, I tend to think of the ways that we can use AI for the better. So I was talking to someone the other day, also in the community, and he was preparing to testify in Congress about how we should think about AI policy. And he was doing something called collecting confusions. And as part of that sort of discovery process, to basically bring a realistic picture of the challenges of getting AI policy right to Congress, he was talking to folks across the community. And one of the questions he asked me was, if you were, senator for a day, what would you decree? And I said two things, but one of which was I would mandate that every single federal agency have an AI strategy, and that strategy needs to spell out in detail how they're going to use AI for every single aspect of their mission. Why would I mandate that? So let's go on a quick diversion. If we think about the average experience of the average citizen with government today, it's terrible. DMV, health insurance, potholes, waiting in line at government offices, the IRS. It's terrible. I'm a public policy nerd. We talked about that, Vicki.
We did. We both have, yes.
Like a weird amount of presidential biographies and historical books on my bookshelf. So I love civics. I love government. I love all of this stuff. But I am not the average citizen. So if you really think about that, it's not actually that confusing why there's so much distrust and anger across society right now. It's because the average citizen's experience with the government that's supposed to be helping them and supporting them in various ways, keeping them safe, et cetera, is failing across the board. And so if we are not using this transformational technology to increase the impact, to make better the services that government provides for citizens, to not improve at an accelerating rate infrastructure, energy, healthcare costs, the discovery of drugs that can better treat rare diseases, on and on, then we as an institution, as a government, as a society are failing ourselves, are failing our citizens. And so there are many ways that AI can go wrong. There are many ways that AI can present specific and novel risks. But I'm an optimist in that, like, I have confidence that we can deal with those in turn. But if we miss the opportunity to use this transformational technology to make our society better, then we have bigger problems.
Geoff, same here. We're kindred spirits because I'm also a policy nerd. Same thing. A lot of presidential biographies on my bookshelf as well. Very passionate about good government and what it can do for citizens. You know, one of the concerns I think in AI, and you've seen there are lots of folks, including some of the CEOs from the technology companies, have appeared on Capitol Hill to talk about sort of the lack of a regulatory and legal system legislation to actually impact regulate sort of AI. You know, it's sort of a free for all. And as you said, the technology is speed is it's such at such a quick pace that the law always lags behind the technology. And so one of the biggest issues is sort of how do we legislate in this area? And I see two really big areas. One is in the copyright area. The writers just ended their strike in Hollywood, and one big piece of the what they were requesting has to do with AI. They were so concerned. It also ties back to our first question about the impact on jobs. The writers were concerned that the studios would use AI generated scripts, and they would no longer need them. And so as part of the agreement that they reached, the studios have agreed not to use AI generated content and to really kind of ban the use of that. But the writers may be able to use it to enhance their own work if they get consent from the studio. So I thought that was a really good balance. Currently, there is no comprehensive law in the United States regulating AI. The same thing with privacy. And I see these two issues really sort of linked in some ways. My background and my cybersecurity background was privacy. I did my final project really on privacy and the regulations in Europe, the GDPR regulations are regulating privacy and content data on the internet. So privacy is another big issue in addition to copyright. On the copyright side of the house, the U.S. Copyright Office, and that's in the resources that folks have in the links that we sent out. The Copyright Office has submitted a Federal Register notice this summer that went out asking for really sort of a plethora of questions about how AI is used, what type of systems is used, what type of data is used, to try to get a handle on where the regulations, the legislation may need to go in the copyright area. In terms of privacy, there's a lot of concern about AI because AI is really built around the data. And the data that's involved in AI, some of that may be our private data. And as I said, we don't have comprehensive privacy legislation in the United States. Some states do, but nothing at the federal level addressing this issue. And so the data and privacy and how that data is used and how you as a owner of data get to control how companies use it will be part of the privacy legislation dealing with AI if we can get there. And that's a really big if we can get there. The European Union issued an AI, I think the first one in the world really of all countries, AI legislation maybe a couple of weeks ago, where they sort of talk about the levels of risk in terms of how AI is used. And so I think the privacy and copyright issues, and the copyright issues, again, tie back to the job impact. The impact of AI on jobs are really two big legal issues that our legislators will have to really address. And it won't be easy because in our country, a lot of that data is out there. I did my project on the use of data and the fact that companies, when you use social media, they have those, you can opt out of this information, but how many people know that even exists? It's buried in those legal agreements and nobody ever reads. You click past it. So those privacy and copyright will be two really big issues that we have to deal with on the legislative front. And there's some real concern about how we tackle those because those issues really impact economics. All of this is so multidisciplinary. It impacts economics. It also impacts social issues. It impacts us globally. So I think the legislative piece of it is really something to watch in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on those two issues specifically, so on copyright, earlier this year, I co-authored a piece with a lawyer in Belgium, Thibaut Dolst, on basically kind of the future of copyright law, IP protections in the age of generative AI. And long story short, we basically concluded that AI, by and large, right now is using this data in accordance with current IP protections with the law, and that actually is kind of bad news because it presents bigger questions about what these laws should be, what these laws actually protect. And when you have such power in these generative AI systems as artists, as creators, as well as broader society, to create, to advance their own work, the issue of what we would want to protect and how we'd want to protect it gets complicated very quickly. And so I think what we're missing is a broader societal conversation about how we value art and culture, how we actually protect that in the law, and what role AI is able to play in this. And the reason, hopefully this is a little bit interesting to this group, the reason why we said that generative AI currently is in accordance with the law is using kind of this analogy. So I'm a painter myself. And my favorite artist is Basquiat. If you were in my house right now, you would see more than one of my paintings taking quite a lot of inspiration from Basquiat. And so if you imagine, me looking through multiple books, podcasts, documentaries, etc., really taking in the nature of his work, the aesthetics of his work, the style, the brush strokes, the compositions, etc. And then me painting something that was very inspired by that, unless I literally copied his works, I am operating in accordance with as you know, Vicki, what's called fair use.
Right.
No one would sue me. His estate couldn't sue me for being in violation of his works. AI operates in much the same way. AI appears to be a mystery to us, but really all it's doing is it's seeing examples of all of these paintings, just like I am seeing physically all of these examples of all of these paintings, and it's producing then a work that is inspired by that data that it saw. Functionally, it is no different than me being inspired by Basquiat and painting something similar. And so in the eyes of the law, there's really not an issue here that we can deal with. We'll see how some of the Getty lawsuits play out. There may be some edge cases here. Photography is different, or photorealistic generative AI systems might be a little different when it comes to photography versus painting or music. But
yeah. Geoff, you and I'd have to go to lunch or have coffee, and I debate you over that very issue, what you just stated. But that's okay. We don't have time to do it today. But that's a really great point. But I would really argue, as a copyright lawyer, I'd argue against that in many ways, representing copyright owners. But for one last question, let's talk about some career paths in AI, and also some of the things that may be on the horizon for AI.
Career paths, it's interesting, but it's hard. I was reflecting on this ahead of this conversation, and I remember one of the things from Yuval Noah Harari's second book, Homo Deus. Actually, it might have been from his third book, 21 Lessons. Both those books are great. Read both those books. But he talks about the skill that's going to be most in demand in an AI-driven future is resilience. is the ability to reinvent yourself multiple times throughout your career, and to be mentally resilient, to make it through the stress and anxiety that goes along with those major pivots, those major changes. I myself, I didn't start in AI. I came from Intel and finance and got into AI in 2018. That was a major career pivot myself, and it was stressful. It was exciting, but it was stressful and it was daunting. And I can't imagine doing that to that degree a second time, let alone 8, 9, 10 times in a career like he was describing. So I think in general, having kind of resilience, having a good network of folks, friends, family, et cetera, that you can rely on when you're going through periods of change and transition, as we in society will embark on quite dramatically here over the next few years, I think is going to be really important. So don't discount the value of just having a good network of people around you, a good support system in your mental health. I think aside from that, there's some specific things like responsible AI, I think is a growth industry. I think economics, like we were talking about, is underrated as a growth industry because of how much we're going to need to pull from that discipline to understand what the future of work is actually going to look like. So human capital, workforce development, strategy, all of these things that are going to help us manage this transition and understand what using AI across our domain sectors and workplaces looks like, and how we should operationalize it for what types of mission sets, et cetera. Those are going to be hugely in demand. Beyond that, I will not pretend like I have any solid answers. And I think we should be hesitant to postulate with too much specificity what career fields, roles, responsibilities, job profiles are going to look like. We just have to be way more adaptive, way more iterative, because this is going to be changing so quickly. The last thing I'll say though is I would not underestimate how creative AI is and will become, and therefore at how much threat those creative driven industries will be. Vicki, you mentioned the writer strike coming to a conclusion. I would say for now.
For now, yes.
So I think just given how creative generative AI, I think is, how I would characterize it as creative, and how much impact that stands to have on music production, on artistic production, creating commercials, which Coca-Cola has already done, on and down the line, I would be very strategic about how you build a career out of creativity, and whether that's using creativity and AI, whether that's being creative but also an economist. I don't know what that combination of things looks like, but the creative industries themselves, if that's going to be your singular path, I worry about that, and that's much to our broader cultural chagrin.
I also think a data scientist, because so much of it is steeped really in the data in terms of AI. So I think that's a career path that folks, and I think on the policy side, as you and I have discussed, I think there are so many policy issues that have to be grappled with in this whole area that folks who have a policy background. Well, I certainly didn't go to law school and public policy school thinking I was going to be a technology and international IP lawyer. And all of that was driven by policy. So that's another really good background for folks to think about. I see Nick is on. Nick.
No, it was a great conversation, and I noticed we have a very active chat. Good questions, and some of the questions I think in a 1 hour setting, probably more appropriately answered in a longer term conversation. So I was encouraging folks to look at all the resources that Sam's been providing, and get engaged on LinkedIn with both of you all, as well as others out there in the field. Because I think the one thing, there's a lot of known unknowns in this, but this is, I will say, is a laboratory of democracy where we're having a good conversation, and how do we start to kind of fill in the lines that are out there. What I'm going to do is I think we're getting a little bit, we have a couple more minutes, but I don't want to shortchange anyone. But I definitely want to think, I would say lightning round, we'll call it, and maybe we can go to Vicki and Geoff, and not to look in the crystal ball, but for our students, for our alumni, what are some areas, thoughts that you think would be good for them to keep an eye on, and careers and thought leadership? So I'll turn it over to you to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Sure.
Vicki,
And,
why
and,
don't
and
you
I'll,
kick us off?
yeah, I was going to say I'll start. Actually, I want to thank Ember for giving us the question on career paths. Excellent question. I think one of the things I always did in my career, and if you look at what I've done a lot of different things. I moved in and out of government, but I was always watching the trends. That was what, not only that, my passion. What was I interested in? What drove me every morning to get out of bed, to go to work? And I'm one of those people who loved what I have done over my entire career. I'm not like a lot of lawyers who go, gosh, I went to law school, I can't stand being a lawyer. That is not my frame of reference at all. I have absolutely loved what I've done because I've been able to look at where the trends are, and my career has really evolved. And so the advice Geoff was giving you about sort of really, looking at where you want your career to go, but looking at what the trends are, where it could go, and be creative. I was very creative in terms of a lot of the things that I was able to do. And so that's my advice for you. Watch the trends. If there are organizations that follow AI, get on their mailing list, subscribe to them so that you can talk about what's going on in the field. If you meet somebody at a event, I had that happen to me. I was at the Shakespeare Theater, and I was actually make a connection and ended up with a job out of that. But I could talk really about what was going on in the field. So that's my best advice: is watch the trends. Also, join organizations. If you're a student, this is a good time to join organizations because you get a student rate to keep track of what's going on in the area, and network. I can't say that enough. Really collaborate with your peers, folks at TWC, at your universities, folks, your internships. Those are my best advice. I've done all of those things throughout my career, and I think it really has helped me to make those transitions throughout my career.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add real quick with that is just when I agree with looking at the trends. When you're looking at the trends, I would say I'd encourage folks to be independent thinkers. So don't let someone else tell you what the trend is. Really understand and make sense of where things are going yourself. So if your industry is education, you're going to read countless reports every year about the future of education. But a lot of that stuff is, is surface deep, and is probably wrong. Certainly no one has a crystal ball. And so really rely on your expertise and your own analysis to figure out, or at least have a strong hypothesis about where your chosen career field is going to go. How is it going to evolve? And how can you position yourself to be successful in that evolution as it evolves? So that's the only piece I'd add, and I add it from a hard experience of not doing that. So I think it's just hugely important. Just have an idea of where things are going based on your own expertise.
Great. No, this is really exciting, because I think as our questions we have in our chat here, there's some really mature questions that are out there. And I think, Washington Center, maybe the three of us are biased, really sets you ahead in your professional journey. Because you get the real world experience, you get to be in ground zero for AI, for this conversation. And I think, as Vicki said, network. I think the longer I've lived in the DC area, it's 3 degrees of separation. And I think, recognizing, it's just a few years ago, I was an intern, and it seems like it can be hard to navigate, but I think there's a lot of folks out there who realize we used to be in that spot, and we want to be involved in the conversation. And, that is something I think is super exciting about the Washington Center is we're talking about a conversation right now that so many individuals are trying to figure out. And I'm excited that our Washington Center alumni are going to be in those conference rooms, in those hearings, in a lot of the different areas that are trying to shape this for us. And the other kind of question I think that's going to happen is, we are one country, but there's a lot of other countries that are looking at this, the privacy concerns over in the EU, and what does that mean for us? Cybersecurity issues that are over there. And so it's not sometimes a one size fits all answer. So that's something to just kind of keep in mind is that there's a lot of material out there. I encourage everybody would remiss without saying to look at Geoff's material. He has a lot of publications out there that are really very deep in this area to really give you some kind of launching points if you're interested in this area. Also, I want to remind folks, alumni LinkedIn group and Facebook links, great way to connect with your alumni. And so that is something I think is great. And then also, I think Sam has to double check my math here. This contact information for three of us, we shared with the attendees today.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Awesome. And then also on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out to any of us to kind of keep this going. And then we have just a few more minutes here. And then I'll give Geoff to tee it up and Vicki the last word. Parting kind of words for our group.
I would say, there's for those that study the Cold War, or foreign policy or the history of U.S. foreign policy, 1945, there was this moment that was called Present at the Creation. It was the title of Dean Acheson's memoirs. He was our Secretary of State at the time. And Present at the Creation, he was trying to capture the spirit of the monumental change that was about to unfold and how literally a handful of people architected the next 75 years of foreign policy in history. I think we're at another Present at the Creation moment. I think we are about to undergo the most radical transformation in society that we've ever experienced. I don't think we quite know what it's going to look like. It will leave some people behind. We should work very hard to minimize that as much as possible and be very clear-eyed about the ways in which that risk will manifest, so we can, as Vicki said, strategically plan hopefully our way out of those issues. But it's also going to herald in the next generation of science and opportunity and wealth creation. Those things are not automatic or givens. So the folks on this call, stake your place in that work. The places are there to stake. It's all hands on deck. But I do believe this is a monumental shift in history that we're living through right now. It's not always easy to see when you're going through change, but I would say change happens very slowly until it happens all at once, and it's about to happen all at once.
I think being part of, just to really to follow on what Geoff is saying, being willing to be part of the discussions and to play a role in this area. If you had told me when I graduated from law school that I was going to be an international lawyer traveling the world, I would have said, who are you talking about? Not me. And that's exactly what I did. So I was willing to take the risk and not be intimidated by what's out there. That's another thing. And really willing to take the risk and be part of the discussion. And it's been wonderful. And so I say that to you in this area. I see this area as really significant as the technology and digital transition, digital globalization and international law that we went through back in the early 90s. Same kind of thing. This is happening much faster. So I say to you, be willing to take the risk, be willing to be part of the discussion, and enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that is, I mean, really great advice from the both of you that is out there, because I think, it's hard, especially nowadays, to predict what are you going to be doing in 30 years. And that is something I think is I think you could have said about enjoy the ride. Because that is something where engagement with Washington Center really makes that ride more pleasurable and answers questions and just everything that's out there for a young professional about, how do you get into these certain fields? Who do you know? And it's one of those things where sometimes the answer is just the door next door. And that is something that's super, super exciting. And as we kind of prepare for that change, we have another event coming up for the Washington Center, our conversations at TWC. And this will be navigating career transitions. And this is with Paula Brand. She's a 1999 graduate, and this will be on November 6th. Sam put the link in the chat. So keep the conversation going and encourage everyone to sign up to attend the event, because I think that's going to be a really exciting opportunity for another good conversation with a group of individuals. We also, I'm going to put a plug in here for the 17th for folks in the DC area. We have a alumni event, and it's the Rayburn House office building. So great if you're in the DC area, please don't be a stranger and stop by and engage with our TWC family, our alumni family. And, super exciting to be part of this conversation with two experts who've really done a lot in this field, and really, give us, the nice thing about the alumni community, allow us to have a good space to chat about this, to really guide us through this. Sam, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out and call it a day.
All right. On behalf of the Washington Center's Alumni Relations team and the Office of Advancement and Partnerships, thank you so much, Vicki, Geoff, and Nick, for carrying us through this amazing conversation. And thank you so much to everyone who attended, including all of the alumni and staff from TWC and even leadership. Our president, Kim Church, has joined us for a portion of the call, so that was great to see. People probably saw her in the chat. So again, thank you, Vicki, Geoff, and Nick, and we wish everyone a good rest of your work week.
This is amazing.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We should do a second version of this sometime in the future.
Yes, part two.
Thank you.
Part
Yeah,
two.
part two. Thank you.
Thank you.